How's it going, guys? I'm Annaliese, and it looked like you lot enjoyed it when I read chapter 1 of J. Manuel's book, The Wig, The Bee, The Meltdown. So I thought I'd do the same thing for Andre Leon Talley's newest book, The Chiffon Trenches. If you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe for ANTM recaps, my outfit checks with fashion and styling inspiration, and videos like this one. I am also super committed to my YouTube schedule, so make sure you hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on anything. And while you're at it, please make sure you show me that you like this video by giving it a thumbs up. So yeah, Andre Leon Talley, The Chiffon Trenches, Chapter 2.
Oops, I actually nearly forgot that this is part 2 of Annaliese reads The Chiffon Trenches. So if you're looking for the intro and chapter 1, you're going to have to take a look at part 1 of this video. I'll pop the link above. As I was saying...
Chapter 2. First thing in January, Diana Vreeland wrote letters on my behalf to every important figure in fashion journalism. Like a trumpet with her booming voice, she built me up to everyone. Halston, Giorgio Angelo, Oscar and Francois de la Renta, Carolina Herrera, all her friends. She never let up speaking on my behalf. She also made sure I was invited to all the right parties, including Halston's legendary soirees, attended by anyone who was anyone in New York. Liza Minnelli, Martha Graham, Bianca Jagger, Elsa Peretti, Diane von Furstenberg, that's where my dress is from in case you missed that memo, the entire Warhol upper echelon. I was there one night with Tone Goodman, another favourite volunteer of Mrs. Vreeland's and a well-connected New Yorker herself. As we dragged along the pale carpeted floor, Fred Hughes, right-hand man and business partner to Andy Warhol, came up to me. Andre, do you think you could come by the factory and meet Andy with Bob? Diana Vreeland says we must have you work with us. I of course said, when do you want me? I'll be there. The following Monday, I began my career as an assistant for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine. I moved off my friend's floor and into a small room at the 23rd Street YMCA, where I battled numerous cockroaches in the public showers, real ones and human ones. Interview was a lean office, adjacent to the big factory space where Andy's loyal staff worked at long makeshift desks in an open reception area. There was an elegant brosserie panelled boardroom where Andy took his lunch. His workspace or his artist studio was the entire length of the floor, divided by a wall just behind the interview offices. Fred Hughes set the tone. He was the sum of elegance, with hair like Tyrone Power and a definite snobbish continental accent. Diana Vreeland loved him, and it was rumoured that she considered him her beau. Or boo? The space was clean and light-filled. Eugene Dupas Art Deco posters hung throughout. The whole atmosphere was light-hearted, but in a serious kind of way. We were expected to be at work on time, and no one spent hours on the telephone social networking. My job was really just to be a glorified receptionist, buzzing in visitors through the bulletproof steel door Andy had put in and taking messages for all the freelance talents. My duties, which include picking up lunch for Andy at the local health food store, started at 12 noon and ended at 6 p.m. Everyone was freelance, so people were always coming in and out. You never knew who you were going to see on any given day. Fran Lebowitz made regular appearances. Her major bestseller, Metropolitan Life, had just come out. She'd walk in, very serious, chain smoking, and ask for her messages. She was intimidating, a great intellect, and succinct in verbal sparring. No one messed with Fran, not even Andy. Everyone was afraid she would torch the place. Metaphorically. Her grumpiness was part of her facade. Fran praised me, saying I was the only receptionist who took the job seriously and actually wrote down accurate messages. Fred Hughes liked to have society ladies fritting about the office, not doing much of anything. They served as ornamentation. Catherine Guinness of Guinness Beer Fortune was working on a piece exploring the underworld of sadomasochism with her gay friends. She would wear leather jackets to the office, playing around with whips and things like that. Fred always wore bespoke everything, including tennis striped jackets and skinny jacquard silk ties. His shoes were polished, the way English dukes polish the same pair of shoes for decades until they become soft gloves for their feet. Fred's apartment was decorated with first-rate antiques. He let his house become a bed and breakfast for all the young ladies who wanted to be part of the scene. Some would stay indefinitely. Everything was kept in a state of pitch-perfect perfection, including Fred's highbrow, fake English accent, hysterical considering he was from Houston, Texas. His mannerisms, his dandyisms, his snobisms were toxic to my budget, but auspicious for my aspirations. Auspicious for my aspirations. Auspicious for...
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
How do you say auspicious?
Sorry, I'm unable to perform that task.
Rude. Go away then. His mannerisms, his dandyisms, his snobism were toxic to my budget, but auspicious for my aspirations. Casual dress was the regular uniform, which made it easy for me to create a distinctive imprint. I wore fine vintage topcoats found in local thrift shops on 55th Street for $10, and tweed trousers, never jeans, as I never felt comfortable in a pair of jeans. Mrs. Vreeland would often take a taxi down to the factory for lunch. On those days, sandwiches would be ordered from Poles on Lexington Avenue. Chicken on brown bread, a small shot of Dewas for Mrs. Vreeland, her healthy tonic, just a shot glass at lunch, and that was it. It was a different time. One day, Mrs. Vreeland came to the factory with Gloria Schiff, a great beauty and twin sister to Consuelo Crespi, Italian editor for American Vogue. I overheard them having a highly pitched debate. "Gloria, what do you mean you discovered Marissa Berenson at a debutante ball?" exclaimed the imperial Vreeland. It was in fact Vreeland who had put Marissa Berenson on the map, having seen her at Elsa Chiaparelli's house in Paris. These names, forgive me. Elsa was Maria's grandmother, and Elsa never forgave Mrs. Vreeland for introducing her to the world of high fashion modelling. For all that I had made was $75 a week. The social life that came along with it was surely priceless. When it came time to assign fashion stories, I was the go-to fashionista in the office. My knowledge and passion in this area was recognised, and I was quickly promoted to fashion editor. I now had the opportunity to interview some of the most exciting stars of society, fashion, and international jet-set acclaim, including Carolina Herrera, the elegant designer from Caracas, Venezuela, who later dressed Jackie Kennedy when she lived in New York. I did Carolina's first official interview in a lavish spread. Bianca Jagger was my favourite stylish subject. In her time, she had wed Mick in the south of France, wearing an Yves Saint Laurent suit and a sweeping portrait hat with a veil. The Rolling Stones were playing at Madison Square Gardens, and Andy had sent me to the Pierre Hotel to pick up Bianca and her wardrobe and bring them to the studio to be photographed for the cover. Bianca answered the door and mentioned to me to walk quietly. Mick was asleep. We tiptoed around the rock star to the huge walk-in closet of the bedroom suite. Quietly, we piled up her beautiful clothes and her favourite shoes that season, Charles Jourdan espadrilles on a high wedge sole. She had half a dozen of them, the same ankle wrap wedge platform sole in an array of colours. All of this was packed in tissue and layered in extraordinary Louis Vuitton suitcases, unlike anything I'd previously seen. They were actually custom-made hunting cases used to pack guns for grouse shoots. Because of the length, she could pack her Zandra Rose crinoline evening gowns flat, no folds in these coffin-like cases. She had bought them in Paris at the Avenue Marseille Louis Vuitton store. Bianca and I took a taxi, piled high with her Vuitton luggage. We bonded over our deep admiration for her friend, the shoe designer Milano Blahnik, and we went on to become friends. That's not helpful. When it came to having access to the elite echelon, Andy provided it, taking me everywhere I wanted to go, from dinners at Mortimer's to movie premieres in subway stations. I met everyone at some movie premiere. CZ Guest, Caroline of Monaco, Grace Jones, Arnold Schwarzenegger. With Andy, anyone could be anyone, and everyone was equal. A drag queen or an heiress. At the factory, if you were interesting, you were in. And while he could be seen out and about at night, Andy also went to church every morning to thank God for his life, his money, and his mother. Andy could be naughty. He also could be vicious, but never to me. From time to time, he would put his pale white hands in my crotch. Always in public, never in private. And I would swat him away the way I did annoying flies in summer on my front porch in the south. Once we went to see an afternoon movie on the Upper East Side, and Andy kept grabbing me every time I would scream out, "Andy!" Andy was naive. Nothing he did offended me. He saw the world through the kaleidoscope colours of a child. He was a kind person, and I considered him to be a very dear friend too. When Andy was in a good mood, he created small signed pieces of art for his staff. A silkscreen print from one of his series, or a small painting like a candy heart in lace on Valentine's Day. It was quite a generous perk. While creating his so-called oxidation paintings, aka the piss paintings, Andy asked me to participate. Instantly, I said, "No, thank you, Andy." All I could think of was my grandmother or mother or father hearing about me. Peeing for art? It would have broken my mama's heart to think that although I was living a successful, adventurous life in New York, I was spending my time creating paintings with urine. Andy also asked me to participate in the sex part paintings. Ooh. We were in interview editor Bob Colasello's office, and Andy said, "Gee, Andre, just think, Victor Hugo is doing it. You could become famous, make your cock famous. All you have to do is let me take a Polaroid of you peeing on the canvas, and I will give you one as a gift." Victor Hugo, the writer, is not whom Andy was referring to, but rather Victor Hugo, the male escort, who was Holston's lover, handsome from Venezuela, notoriously well endowed and possessed of beautiful skin. He was also a window display artist for the Holston boutique and had apparently now somehow gotten a gig at the factory doing these outpourings of overt sexual exploration. Was his name really Victor Hugo? Of course not. There was nothing really remotely Victor Hugo about Victor Hugo. He never quoted the literary giant, he never spoke about him, he didn't subscribe to literary brilliance. But he did piss on a canvas for Andy Warhol, and his penis did indeed become famous. This is juicy! Are you guys liking it? Please do let me know in the comments below, because I am living on every word of this. Andy loved hanging around with Victor and often included him in his factory workshop life. I knew him well, but I was not witness to the full thrusting erect penises into his mouth in a working session with Andy, while others were going about their duties putting out interview. Ghastly as it seemed, at some point Andy did indeed elevate pornography or pornographic interest through Victor Hugo. For the record, I have no doubt Andy never had sex with Hugo except with his Polaroid and his art. Victor invented himself as an artist, as a disruptor, as a unique individual in New York's cultural mix. One of his Holston windows featured a hospital tableau with a woman giving birth in a Holston dress. He once had a live chicken dipped into liquid the colour of blood and left it alone to walk along the corridor. The white carpeted corridor of Holston's East Side Paul Rudolph townhouse. Just to shock Holston. It worked, he was shocked. American designer Norma Kamali worked on Madison Avenue and befriended Victor. He would pass by nearly every day. One day, Norma was draping a new swimsuit. The next day, the design had been leaked and ended up as a Halston original on page 1 of Women's Wear Daily. Norma confronted Victor, who responded like a naughty child, caught doing something forbidden. Later, he was forgiven. Victor arrived at Norma's studio with a gift: huge surplus silk parachutes. She skillfully turned them into high fashion: jackets, sheared trousers, ball gowns and jumpsuits, with the pull release intact. Diana Vreeland later insisted they'd be included in her Vanity Fair Costume Institute exhibition. Norma turned defeat into victory. One night around the same time, Reed Evans and I were house guests of Calvin Klein at his home on Fire Island in the Elegant Pines section. We ended up sharing a bed and we were falling asleep. Victor came in and crashed on top of us, uninvited. He fell asleep like a bear in winter hibernation. Reed and I, curious about the legendary size of his penis, pulled back the white sheet and exposed the family jewels, which Reed described as the size of a Schaller and Weber salami. It was uncircumcised is all I remember. That night we slept with Reed in the middle, Victor on one end and me on the other side. In 1975, Karl Lagerfeld was already head creative designer at Chloe and perched to take his place at the top of the fashion world. Chloe had been a staid, bourgeoisie house for housewives who could afford good ready-to-wear in Paris. After Karl got there, Chloe became extremely influential. Grace Marabelle, who replaced Mrs. Vrishi as the editor-in-chief of Vogue, was married in a Chloe white turtleneck blouse embroidered with pearls. This was a big thing, to pick a Chloe look as opposed to Yves Saint Laurent. Pret-a-porter, aka ready-to-wear, was taking off, and Karl had always had a knack for delivering bizarrely innovative clothes that were unanimously acclaimed by retailers and press alike. He'd make a print with robots and space mobiles and turn it into a $1,000 dress. His jewellery could be big plastic red roosters or chickens, or plastic magic markers, coloured tulips on a necklace over a luxurious foundation, like a black Regindo wool coat, exquisite and expensive, made to last through the generations. The clothes were surreal and sophisticated, but most important, they were youthful and inspired. This was represented in Karl's approach to Chloe's fashion shows. They purposefully didn't have an assigned lineup of models and outfits. Backstage, Karl would tell the models to pick whatever they wanted to wear from the rack. This was unheard of to this day. There were shows micromanaged down to the smallest detail. After the show, he'd tell the models to keep the clothes they'd worn. They didn't make that much money at that time, and it was a way of saying thank you. Interview was planning a Paris-themed issue, and Karl was due in New York to promote his new Chloe fragrance. Karl had never been profiled for interview before, and Andy suggested that I could conduct the interview, for which I'm very grateful for. I did everything I could do to prepare for the meeting with Karl. Serious research. I knew Karl was influenced by 18th century French style and that he was emulating it in his own personal life. As a long-time Francophile, I knew the basics, but I dug deeper to prepare. I read every interview he had done and researched as many references he'd made as possible. When we arrived at the plaza, we were directed upstairs to a large suite. I sat down across from Karl in the living room, my notebook ready. Member of Lagerfeld's entourage floated in and out of the bedrooms. Seated next to him was his boyfriend, the handsome debonair Jacques de Bacher. Andy and Fred Hughes had accompanied me, as well as famed fashion illustrator Antonio Lopez and Juan Ramos, friend of Lagerfeld's, who just returned from Paris to take up his residence in New York. Antonio was creating visuals for the Paris interview issue. In previous years, Antonio's creative energy had helped drive Karl Lagerfeld. Now there was a noticeable chill between them. I wondered what the story was, but I focused instead on what I'd come to do. Lagerfeld was bearded and dressed in a bespoke crepe de chine shirt and a 6-foot-long muffler. I had on khaki Bermuda shorts, a pinstripe shirt and aviator glasses from Halston's, knee-high socks and moccasin penny loafers. We spoke about the 18th century, the style, the culture, the carpets, the people, the women, the dresses, the way the French entertained, set the table. It wasn't laboured or anything especially deep, but I'd learned a lot in that conversation and I was grateful for the knowledge. Fashion's fun, you can't take it too seriously. Frivolity must be an integral form, Carl said to me. As we spoke, Antonio drew us, while Juan directed him on the right position and attitude to convey. Andy and Fred sat quietly, the minutiae of proper attire in the 18th century court likely going right over their heads. How exhilarating to be able to prove myself to Andy and to his team as they sat there quietly and listened. Carl seemed impressed by my desire to learn and gave me a great interview. My southern manners helped, I'm sure. It would be easy to imagine how cocky and brash a young editor at interview had the potential to be. Afterward, we had high tea. The whole thing was so elegant. Then quietly, Carl asked me to follow him to his private bedroom. Andy smiled widely and shyly, as though he couldn't imagine what this was. I smiled too, nervously. I could imagine, but I was trying my hardest not to. I followed Carl into the huge bedroom, crowded with go-yard jacquard trunks and suitcases of every possible size and dimension. He opened the trunks and out like a geyser spitting forth toxic ash, he threw a beautiful silk crepe de chine shirt in Kelly green and a pink peony, each with a matching scarf. I'm not even quite sure what a crepe de chine shirt is, but it sounds fun. Take this, it will look good on you. Take that, I'm tired of these shirts. You should have them. He'd had these shirts specifically made by the gross at the Paris firm of the London haberdashery, Hilditch and Key. They had long sleeves and beautiful buttons like smocks. I took them happily. Those shirts were the start of my wardrobe. I wore them like a badge of honour until they wore out. That's how Carl and me first met. We would stay friends for 40 years, until we weren't. Oh my days, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I mean, could you tell? I ended up reading the intro, chapter 1 and chapter 2. I mean, I quite enjoyed the style that he's writing in. I don't know, it was quite easy to read. Apart from all the references and all the fashion names, like I am tripping over my tongue left, right and centre. I am definitely butchering some very important people's names. I apologise. I feel like it went straight into juice, into substance, into gossip. Like it was interesting straight away, right? All the stuff with Andy Warhol and the penises and the bedrooms. Oh. There was definitely some things and phrases that went right over my head, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. The world of Andre Leon Talley, or should I say the Chiffon Trenches of Andre Leon Talley, has definitely got me intrigued, and I'm definitely going to keep on reading this book. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and also let me know your comments down below. Like, are you going to be reading the Chiffon Trenches? Also, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will be coming out with more content, but in the meantime, you can watch me read chapter 1 from J. Manuel's book, The Wig, The Bee, The Meltdown. And I've also actually got an awesome fashion review of the Burberry Spring Summer fashion film. Check that out as well, and I'll be back soon.